Hi, I'm Jason, and in this video I'm going to show you how to document your inventory so you can keep track of the instruments in your classroom. Okay, the first thing we have to do is set up a spreadsheet. Use whatever spreadsheet you want to. Across the top, you're going to want to make one column that says instrument, and you'll list the types of instruments that you have below that. As you can see here, we've got flute, clarinet, bass clarinet, all the way through the band inventory of this program down to percussion. The next column should be the case number. That's the number that's been painted on the outside of the case, and we'll get to that later in the video if you haven't done that yet. After that, you'll determine what make, so what company made the instrument that's in your inventory, and then you'll find the serial number and record it below this column heading. The status refers to when the instrument was received. If you just entered a program and you don't know what year that the instruments were purchased or received into the program, then you could just put in here original inventory like we did for flutes 3 and 4. If, on the other hand, you had an instrument that was provided through the Repair and Replace Committee or was purchased through different means, you would notate that here, providing you a record of how old that instrument is. After that, I have a column for each of the years that I'm in a program, and anytime an instrument's required a small or large repair, I make note of it in that column so I have an ongoing record of the repair schedule for that instrument. Once you've got your inventory completed, then it's something you can share with administration. When you apply for grants or different programs at the board, it's a thing that may be requested, and you can pass it on to teachers in the future. On the screen here, you can see that this is an inventory that's been maintained over several years, and there are plenty of different types of instruments and serial numbers here. I'd like to draw your attention to this area over here. Now, in the year 2017 to 2018, it required a certain amount of repair. Then again in 2018 to 19, a little more, and then once more in 2019 to 2020. This is an instrument that over time has required so much attention that it's really nearing the end of its life, much like a car would, where the more you start paying on repairs, the more you start thinking about wanting a new vehicle, which is why in 2019, that instrument was replaced through the Repair and Replacement program that the board has run for many years. This is an indicator that the instrument is starting to cost more than it's worth, and it's a good chance for you to start to look at needing to upgrade your inventory. It's also great to have that data to go to an administrator and say, this is an instrument that's costing us some problems, we should really replace it. The next thing I'm going to show you is how to paint the cases to make sure that they're easily identifiable to anyone who sees them, that they come from the inventory at your school. What you're going to need is a can of spray paint, a bottle of white fabric paint, and obviously a stencil with your school's name on it. We're using the one from Locks for this video, but you might have to make your own stencil with an X-Acto knife and a piece of cardboard. First thing you need to know is you can't just paint it anywhere in any way. If you have a system to the way that you paint the cases, the kids will be able to use that system to more safely manage your inventory. What I like to do is I make sure that the handle of the case is closest to the floor and that the case opens up. The lid of the case is where I paint, and that way when it's on the floor in front of the student, they can see the school's name, and as they open it, it opens the lid like that. The reason for that is if you paint on the other side, you can't use that as a rule when you're teaching the kids how to set up the equipment. I also paint it so that when they're carrying the case, the school's name is emblazoned on the outside, again, so it's easily identifiable as coming from your program. Set up the stencil, and make sure you do this in a well-ventilated area, or preferably outside. Set up the stencil, center it on the case, and then liberally spray the paint onto the stenciled letters. Then carefully remove the stencil so it doesn't smear the paint on the case itself. You're also going to want to number the case according to what your inventory says that instrument number is. The fabric paint is an easy way to paint that number onto the outside of the case. You're going to want to paint it in 2 locations, one on the end that faces out when it's on the shelving, and somewhere else on the case so that it's easy for the student to identify which one is theirs, either on the front, or if you don't have room, you can also do it on the top of the case. With some instruments, you also want to make sure that you've always got the same equipment within the same case. Personally, I engrave all of the mouthpieces for my instruments, but even if you just have the opportunity to make sure that the head joints for the flutes match the bodies for the flutes, that's going to save you a world of trouble in the future because those head joints are not interchangeable on those instruments. First thing you need to have is obviously an engraving machine. They're not terribly expensive. If you don't have that, find a way to etch a number on gently, but this is probably the safest way to take care of that engraving. When you're engraving the flute head joint, it's important that you avoid the tenons and the lip plate. I typically engrave right back here, opposite the lip plate, when I'm doing mine. You want to put the number from the case right here. This is flute number 1, so I would engrave a number 1 right there. It's also important that you match that head joint with the body. Again, avoid the tenon, and I would typically engrave right here on the body with the number 1 again. That way the number 1 head joint matches the instrument that it's supposed to go into, and you won't have any problems fitting it. Lastly, when we're talking about the serial numbers for your instruments, I got some bad news. They're not that easy to find. Not only are the locations different from instrument type to instrument type, but from brand name to brand name. So 2 flutes may have their serial numbers in wildly different locations. We'll go over that in the instrument-specific videos later on, but for now, if you have any trouble finding the serial number, a quick Google search should help you out.